First Thoughts with Reverend Jools Hamilton.
Good morning, and what a delight to get to share a first thought with you today. Thank you for the invitation, Father Martin, and thank you all for the challenge. The gospel reading for today comes from Matthew 13 and begins at verse 31. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken to the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. My first thought this morning is a simple one. What we do matters. Our words, the tone of those words, the stories we share about those words, the actions we take because of the stories that we share, these things matter deeply in the world, for you may not know how they are used in the good of the kingdom of God. The actions that take place in these short parables, we note, they push us into the midst of the earth, the inner places of depth and evolving, of growth and nature and nurture. Jesus speaks of soil, and he speaks of bread, an element made from the very stuff of the earth. So friends, our words and our actions are planted. They grow, they are deep, they are nurtured, and they develop as they are sown. All of this continues all themes already expounded in this chapter. Goodness that is sown reaps reward. Kindness and generosity and hospitality and bridge building and barrier breaking, these things do not disappear into the ether. Small actions, small words can have big impressions, big impact. It's true, Van Gogh only sold one painting in his lifetime. Red Vineyard at Arles was sold 7 months prior to his tragic death for 350 francs, maybe round about 2,000 in today's money. It is unknown what you would have to pay if you wanted to buy Red Vineyard at Arles now. But as a guide, Van Gogh's portrait of Dr. Gachet sold in 1990 for over 80 million US dollars. You do not know the impact of your work, your words, or your actions as you put them into the world. You may not see that impact. Harvest, friends, takes time. It takes rain, it takes sun, and sometimes it takes manure. Yeast works its magic through the darkness of the night. You don't put yeast into a dough and see it suddenly jump to full size. You don't plant a mustard seed and see a tree 5 seconds later. The growing can take years and may not be seen by you or us. As Oscar Romero pointedly reminds us, we are ministers, not messiahs. We are workers, not master builders. We are prophets of a future, not our own. What you put out into the world matters. There is a brilliant TV ad called Children See, Children Do. It's one of the best ads I've ever seen on TV. Children See, Children Do. Put it into YouTube after you've listened to this. It's the National Association for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect in Australia. Created it as part of a campaign to highlight how our actions influence our children, and especially how thoughtless, aggressive, self-centered and violent behavior is copied and continued by children. Amongst other snippets in the ad, You can see a man shouting at an immigrant in a laundrette. His son, maybe 8 years old, behind him, pointing and shouting just like him. A woman stomping out a cigarette at the top of an escalator, and perhaps a 6-year-old daughter behind her doing the same thing. You can see a man shove past a woman who is pushing a pram, followed by his young son doing exactly the same thing. And you can see a woman extending her middle finger from the car, shouting, "Have you even got a driver's license?" Followed by her son, maybe 6, in the back seat, pulling a face and extending his finger to the driver also. The ad has really stayed with me and come back to me recently, because last week, as I was driving along the A1, overtaking at a regular legal speed, there was an angry Mercedes driver behind me. Obviously not content to go at the legal speed, but wanted the road to themselves. This driver illegally moved to undertake as I was pulling in. So the car then pulled back out into the outer lane. And as it drove past me, when I got into the inner lane, a blonde woman pumped her horn at me, pulled the most horrible face, and extended her middle finger towards me. I'm smiling as I remember, because I was too shocked by the behavior of an otherwise attractive woman who looked in her mid-30s to make any other response than an unbelieving laugh. What really stays with me, though, was the son in the front seat beside her. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. And as she extended her middle finger towards me, it ran right across the front of his face. What did that moment say to him about how this world works and what is acceptable behavior? What you put into the world matters. Goodness, kindness, generosity, love, they will grow. Anger, frustration, fear, impatience, intolerance, bitterness, rage, they will grow too. It's easy to remind ourselves of the possible impact of love in the world. We all know that love changes things. We all know that we need love, and we all want to be people who give and receive love. We know that putting love into the world finally sees the kingdom of God come alive. And isn't it good to remind ourselves sometimes that putting other things into the world also matters? Putting self into the world, self-loathing, self-protection, self-centeredness, putting a kingdom of self into the world, that diminishes the kingdom of God. What you put into the world matters. So let it be love. Let it grow. Those are my first thoughts as we begin a new week.